obviously it's halfway through the Parliament now, and we are trying to be one of the few Labour oppositions that manages to return into government within one term. Yep. Because there's a rather depressing sort of historical pattern that we're trying to break, and that is that once we lose power we tend to be out of government for 2, 3 or 4 terms. If we look at what the coalition government have managed to do to our country in 2 years, I think it will be pretty difficult to contemplate the sort of society that we inherit if we fail in our task. And I think I've never been in a circumstance where so much is in flux and there's so much at issue to guide our future politics. But what happened in 1979 with the loss of the Labour government then was a disjunction. It was the end of an era in British politics. It was the end of the Butsker-lite consensus which came out of the Second World War. Many of you will be very familiar with when that model, that Keynesian model, and that model of social justice and society broke down and was replaced with a much harsher model. I'll call it the Reagan Consensus. And what's happened in those last 30 years is that for every pound of extra income and wealth that was created, 14 pence of it has gone to the bottom 50% of people in the income distribution. 24 pence of every pound has gone to the top 1%. So I think we're at the end of an era. And I think the end of it was signalled but not accepted in 2008. And I say that that sort of system is a bit like a zombie running round. It's dead, but it doesn't believe it's dead. And we've got to stop it, tackle it, rugby tackle it in any way we can and put it in the ground. The Conservative Party and their Liberal Democrat allies in the coalition government here haven't let this crisis go to waste. They've used it to argue that there should be a smaller state, to say that social justice is just too expensive a price to pay in the modern world, and that we should actually lower the size of the public sector, cut a lot of social security benefits. Is it acceptable to see our social fabric torn asunder in the way that it is being now? Is it acceptable in our values that come April the 1st there'll be huge cuts to disability support, huge cuts, the bedroom tax will come in, £18 billion of social security cuts with another 10 billion to come, affecting some of the poorest people around, many of whom, by the way, work, not people who are these skivers that they talk about when they're trying to divide and rule. Is it acceptable that at the same time as that's happening, that a huge tax cut costing over £3 billion will be given to those who currently pay the 50 pence rate? Is that the definition of we're all in it together? There's been a huge increase in poverty within our country, which we can see by the existence and the springing up of food banks. Now, I have 3 food banks in Wallasey. I never thought I'd live to see the day when people are being sanctioned, come to see me with no money, and they have to go to a food bank so they can get anything to eat. I mean, these are very, very different times than the ones I thought we'd be enjoying when I first got into politics. So we've got to go back to all of those areas and start arguing about our values, why we're in the Labour Party, and how we can make certain that out of this crisis we don't just end up with the smallest public sector that we've had since the Second World War, which is where we'll be by 2015 if all these cuts happen, the smallest public sector that we've had since the Second World War, having suffered the largest cuts to public expenditure that we've had in our peacetime history, at the same time as we have an ageing population, and so the demands on things like our health services are increasing just as that's happening, we're having a smaller and smaller amount of money available to pay for services. And this government think that the way of proceeding is to divide and rule, to divide one bit of our society against another. So we have shirkers and strivers, deliberately set up as a way in which people could look down on anyone who was relying on benefits. Connected to quite outrageous and outrageously bad and biased reporting by a lot of the newspapers about those who do rely on benefits, which completely distorts the reality. Meanwhile, now I think the best thing for me to do is sit down and take questions. Feel free to ask me about anything, absolutely anything within reason, and I'll do my best to answer.